All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Doing well enough, all things considered these days. How about yourself?
Things going well here. Jack has a baseball game and a soccer game that overlap a little tomorrow, and we were going to run from one to the other. But now, unfortunately, his foot got injured a little bit during soccer practice, so he may have to miss them both. But hopefully he'll be fine. We got an x-ray this morning, and it was clear. But other than that, things are going great. My daughter's big play is next week, and my son just got named Student of the Month for his very first month of middle school, and things are going well here.
For us, I know that I mentioned that my daughter was going to be in this off-Broadway production, and there was going to be a live stream, and I was very excited, and I was telling everyone about it, including you and your family. Yes. And it then turned out that they didn't put any thought whatsoever into miking anything. So just whatever mic was in whatever device was recording from the back of the audience is all that it had. And so it was it was extremely unhearable. So that was disappointing. But it was great to be able to see her perform. Yes. And she did have at least one bit of physical comedy where she spills a多 drink all over somebody's laptop. So I was at least able to see some of that. Yeah. But one way or the other, we are extremely proud of her and are looking forward to more.
Yes, we tried to stream it and realized we couldn't hear it, but we did get to see her bit of business, which was she was very funny. We got a big laugh out of us. And yes, that's so exciting to have an off-Broadway debut. But I have one more thing to bring up before we jump into the comics, or one thing that ties into Fantastic Four, which will be our first book. So we had a fascinating bit of very backdoor viewer mail. Do you listen to my other podcast, A Good Story Well Told? Did you listen to our most recent episode on K-pop Demon Hunters?
I did, yes.
Yes. So you then know, but for our listeners at home who don't listen to that podcast, they do not know that it turns out that my co-host on that other podcast is named Jonathan Auxier, and it turns out that his dad is not only a fan of that podcast, he's also a fan of this podcast. And he asked me to pass on the air live on that show, he asked me to pass on a note to us, which then I've never acknowledged on this show, that he was like, we were talking about how Dr. Doom, I think this was actually in Daredevil, not in Fantastic Four, come to think of it. They were talking about the countries that border Latveria, and they were saying that, some were allied with Soviet Union, and one was allied with Communist China. And so you were trying to figure out then where Latveria is based on that. It must border countries that border the Soviet Union or Communist China.
Yeah, and I basically was just like, oh, well, this is imaginary. Nothing like that would have actually existed, but continue.
But then Jonathan Auxier's dad, I'm sorry, I don't know the first name of, Jonathan Auxier's dad said, nope, that's Albania. So apparently, at some point during the Cold War, Albania had a falling out with the Soviet Union, and then I'm sure America was like, oh, great, now they'll come within our sphere of influence. And instead, Albania is like, nope, we're now going to be under the sphere of influence of Communist China, which is quite strange for a country in the Balkans. And I think it's in the Balkans, is Albania in the Balkans?
I believe it's considered in the Balkans. I wonder if that, well, no. I mean, Albania is primarily a Muslim country, if I'm not mistaken, because of the influence of the Ottoman Empire. I don't know whether that but China isn't, I don't know.
Yeah, no,
never mind. It makes no sense.
So then Jonathan Auxier's dad was going, this is great because it finally lets us know where Latveria is. We know it touches Albania, so that allows us to narrow it in a little further. So anyway, that was a bit of viewer mail we had, correcting us as to our supposition that only countries bordering Communist China would be allied with Communist China. He's like, nope, Albania was. So that was some good viewer mail. But should we go ahead and jump in to the second part of this month's book, Steve?
Yes, let's go ahead and do it. So we're starting out with Fantastic Four number 74, and I believe we decided that you are going to take this one.
Yes. So we should explain again that Marvel is publishing more superhero books this month than they ever have before. The most they've ever published in a month was 10 before, and now they're publishing 13 this month. So for the first time, we're breaking these books up into 3 episodes. So this is episode 2 of 3, discussing the books of May 1968. So this week, we're going to do Fantastic Four, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, a special Marvel Superheroes featuring Spider-Man and Submariner #1. So let's go ahead and begin with Fantastic Four #74. When calls Galactus, it says on the cover. So once again, we have no Fantastic Four on the cover. We just have Galactus using his old Punisher robot, which we haven't seen since issue 49, to attack the Silver Surfer on the cover.
With lots of Kirby cosmic stuff and Kirby crackle and all sorts of that in the space background here.
Yes, at one point in the early days of this podcast, I was referring to something as like Cosmic Kirby Crackle with 3 Ks, and you're like, no, we can't do that. And I was like, why not? I was like, oh, you mean because of the Ku Klux Klan? And you're like, yes. And I'm like, no, okay.
Precisely because of that.
I didn't mean to summon up intimations of the Ku Klux Klan by talking about Kirby, but okay.
Yes.
So then,
exactly, precisely.
Okay. So then this issue begins. The fabulous FF learn that humanity faces Armageddon when calls Galactus. So brought to you in all its mind-expanding majesty by Stan the Manly and Jack King Kirby, embellished by Joe Sinnott, lettered by Artie Simek. So we have the Thing shows up at Alicia's apartment. I guess she doesn't like the door because he just barges in. And there she is once again comforting the Silver Surfer, which just drives mad. I was going to say it drives Ben mad with jealousy. It's not mad. It just drives him into very depressed jealousy and very mopey and depressed. And he was going to give Alicia a box of chocolates, and instead he starts eating them himself and says that he has to give them all to Silver Surfer now instead of Alicia. So then she's like, Silver Surfer has come to tell me that Galactus is coming back to destroy the Earth. And Ben's like, oh, right, and you're leaving me too. Boy, it's just the worst. It says, I guess it means I give him these candy wandies for a going-away present. I hope they give you heartburn, you bum. And then Silver Surfer is finally like, I am telling you that Galactus is coming to destroy the Earth. Stop moping that I was hanging out with your girlfriend. And at this point, Ben is finally like, oh, wait. No, you're right. That is actually worse. Galactus destroying the Earth, worse than my girlfriend beating my time, as Ben would say. So then... And
I love the shot on page 3, panel 2, where we're looking at an extreme close-up of Silver Surfer's face, and we see, once again, just Kirby cosmic background filling his eyes, and it's a really nice effect. Although also on page 3, panel 4, is it just me? What is going on with the back of Silver Surfer's head there on panel 4?
I don't know. I was wondering that. It looks more like the back of Ronan the Accuser's head or something.
It very much does. Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, maybe Sinnott didn't realize that was supposed to be the back of Silver Surfer's head. I'm not sure. But so then we cut back to the Baxter Building where they're repairing the damage from last issue. Last issue didn't seem like it did that much damage. You know, Spider-Man, Daredevil, and Thor attacked the Baxter Building, but it was mainly, Thor was mainly away from the Baxter Building, and it was mainly Spider-Man and Daredevil attacking the Baxter Building, and they don't do much damage, you know, famously.
Yeah.
But they're welding girders and trying to reconstruct the Baxter Building. And then suddenly the Thing and Silver Surfer showed up. The Thing has to sort of ride Silver Surfer's surfboard like it's a kiddie seat in a shopping cart. And then they show up and they're like, oh no, the Punisher's coming. Well, now the Punisher is here. Now, keep in mind, this is not the Punisher that will later be introduced in the 70s in Spider-Man number 129. This is the other Punisher, the one that we met briefly back in the original Galactus storyline, who is a robot who looks like he is wearing long sleeves and shorts, who shows up, and he has once again come to attack the Earth. I guess since the Silver Surfer abandoned Galactus, Galactus has just had to use the Punisher not just as his enforcer, but also as his herald to a certain extent. Of course, Galactus will go through a lot more heralds over the course of Marvel Comics. Making a complete list of all of Galactus's heralds would be good Marvel trivia.
Would you include Aunt May?
That was in a what if, so that wouldn't count. So then the Thing gets in a big walloping battle with the Punisher, which is always fun. Meanwhile, Reed and Crystal are with Sue, who is supposedly very pregnant, although she still doesn't look very pregnant. She's wearing stripes, which are slimming. Then they see out the window that there's gigantic flames in the sky and big, scary things going on, and both Crystal and Reed sort of silently communicate with each other, let's hide this from Sue. So together they hide this from Sue, and then Reed says, I hated to lie to her, but I had no choice.
At first they're having this sort of silent communication about hiding it from her, but then as soon as they both stick their heads out the window, they're just having a whole conversation about it. They bring their heads back in, and they're like, oh, no, you didn't hear any of that.
Pregnant people can't hear very well, Steve. It clogs up your ears.
Famously.
Yes. So then Ben and Johnny are still fighting the Punisher. Reed shows up to help. And then we cut to just absolutely gorgeous 2 pages of Galactus, who is still way out in the middle of nowhere and looking for places to eat. He says, "My journeying has been in vain. Each star I visit is barren. Save for the planet Earth, this sector seems woefully devoid of life, but Galactus can wait no longer. Without the nourishment of a living planet, I die, and Galactus must never perish." And then you get just a gorgeous big splash page of Galactus sort of looking out into nothingness and saying that he's going to have to break his pledge to never eat the Earth. Now, again, when I was a kid and I'd read comics, I'm going like, why don't they just have Galactus eat Mars? But it was never clear to me that he needs a planet with life on it. So then, anyway, the big battle keeps on going for several more pages. Galactus finally shows up on the Earth and is here to eat it. And then they're like, well, at least we've hidden, because he's here to eat the Earth, but he's also here to reclaim Silver Surfer and forcibly reaccept him back into his old job. He gets to Earth, sucks the Punisher back up into his ship. The Fantastic Four are like, well, that's not actually good that he sucked the Punisher back up, because that means he's ready to go ahead and start eating. And it's like going, but at least he didn't find the Surfer. What did happen to the Surfer? They're like, well, before he vanished, the Surfer said, there are worlds within worlds. And it says, next issue, we will journey to the microverse. So presumably the Silver Surfer has disappeared into the microverse here. I guess just to hide from Galactus, or maybe to try to lure him there. I'm not sure. We will find out next issue. I haven't read these issues in a while.
He's going to recruit Baron Karza.
Yes. And then at the end, we have letters from both Tony Isabella and Don McGregor. So, Steve, what did you think of this issue?
I thought it was great. The art was fantastic. The stakes were high. The emotions were big. And yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. One other visual thing I want to point out, you've pointed out most of the remarkable visuals that I was going to bring up. The one thing is on page 7, Thing is on another little transportation thingamadoohickey that Reed has made. And this one in particular looks like he's having to lean way forward to use this thing. Like the little foot stands are way too far back and the handles are way too far forward. It really looks like it's going to be terrible on your back.
Not ergometric, Reed.
Ergonomic?
Ergometric? Ergo something.
Yes.
Ergo cogito something like that.
Sure, why not? So overall, I give it 2 big thumbs up.
Yes, I say in my notes, excellent issue. Recovered from that terrible Mad Thinker storyline. These are great characters. I wish they'd let Sue look pregnant. They let Lucy look pregnant on I Love Lucy. That was before this. Why can't they let Sue look pregnant? And she certainly looked pregnant the next time she's pregnant with her tragic pregnancy during the Byrne storyline. But this is a great issue. It's great to have another Galactus saga going. It's fun to see the Punisher again, who I had thought we would never see again. I'd completely forgotten he comes back here. But Ben being so mopey at the beginning, first eating Alicia's chocolates for himself and then trying to give them away to the Silver Surfer is a little much, but it's funny, so I'll forgive it.
Yeah, it's a funny bit.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to The Incredible Hulk. Once again, he is in his own book. This is his second solo issue. On the cover, it says, "And now the space parasite." And we see that in the background of this fight is Yankee Stadium. And we are indeed going to be seeing Yankee Stadium on the inside of this book as well. Don't look now, but even Stan Lee editor, Gary Friedrich scripter, Marie Severin artist, Frank Giacoia inker, Artie Simek letterer, remember that as we ended our last epic, Big Daddy Odin had zapped the Hulk back to Earth. And since Norse gods aren't noted for doing things up small, look where old Greenskin landed, smack dab in the middle of Times Square. Hoo boy. Of course, Odin has placed him right in the middle of Times Square because New York City is really the only real location on planet Earth. So
well, he knows that he wants to reward Hulk for his help in Asgard. So the way you reward someone when you send them to Earth is you send them to the M&M store in Times Square, which is the happiest place on Earth.
Yes. I have long held that view myself. So anyway, Hulk ends up causing some damage in Times Square trying to get away from people, ends up jumping up on top of a building and is sort of clinging to the side of it when, for whatever reason, he turns back into Bruce Banner. His transformations still seem to be a little bit random at this point. They don't necessarily seem to be caused by being angry versus being calm, it can be a little fuzzy. So it turns back into Bruce Banner while still clinging to the cornice of this building. He's suddenly like, "Oh my God, what am I? I got to climb up onto the roof of this thing."
I'm not a huge fan of the art in this issue. I don't think that Severin and Giacoya are working very well together. I'd say that page number 3 is the big exception. I really like the Hulk. Great down shot of the Hulk clinging to the building. Then really nice panels of the Hulk transforming to Bruce Banner, especially panel 3 on page 3 of the 4 states of transformation. And then really harrowing of Bruce Banner realizing that he is transformed while clinging to the side of a building overlooking Times Square. It is, although at this point he may be overlooking Bryant Park, it's hard to tell. And then really nice page on page 3 from Severin and Giacoya.
I agree with you. This is not Marie Severin's strongest stuff. And the thing is, Frank Giacoya is one of their A-list inkers. And I would think that Giacoya with Marie Severin would be a great combination. But yeah, it doesn't really seem to do much.
The whole issue looks kind of rushed and sloppy. There's a lot of sketchy panels in here.
Yeah. So General Ross and Talbot and Rick Jones are all on some kind of news talk show, and the Army or Air Force, that's once again a little unclear. It's always been a little unclear which one.
Frequently they have these TV shows in Marvel Comics where we're supposed to guess, like, oh, that's clearly supposed to be Johnny Carson, or that's clearly supposed to be David Susskind, or Huntley or Brinkley or various people. But I don't think we're supposed to guess who this person is. I don't think that this is the host of this talk show is anybody real. I'm not sure.
One way or the other, the two military folks are getting raked over the coals for having not been able to bring the Hulk in. It turns out that Bruce Banner, meanwhile, has made it through the stairwell down into the basement of this high-rise that he was in, and is able to find some lockers for the staff in here, or workers, or I don't know what kind of building this is. But he's able to steal some clothes. Now, this becomes a real go-to of his story during the 70s and 80s. But I think this is the first time we've really seen this, with him going and just finding whatever clothes he can find and putting those on. Can you think of him doing that before?
It's hard for me. I've read so many Hulk comics in which he steals clothes. It'd be hard for me to remember whether or not we've actually seen that up until this point or not.
This might be the first time. Anyway, so then we see a character called the Space Parasite, who sees Hulk in his little viewoscope and is like, aha, I need to, suck life energy from other beings in order to continue my existence. And this looks like such a powerful being. This is the next one whose life I shall suck.
So is that supposed to be his mouth? Is this supposed to be like a King and Kodo style dripping maw? And those are supposed to be like, that's supposed to be like spittle connecting the top of his mouth to the bottom of his mouth. It's very hard to tell if that's his neck or his mouth. And if he's just got a very, very drooly mouth, it's very hard to tell.
Yeah, I read it as spittle, as, strings of saliva there in his open mouth. Also, on page 5, it looks like he has other eyes on the sides of his head, but throughout the rest of the issue, we don't really see those. They kind of get disappeared behind his collar there, which seems like it would be a problem if those are eyes that you've got. I guess they still do show up on page 6. Let's see. Rick Jones on this TV show starts having a change of heart and starts deciding, you know what? The Hulk really is dangerous. Maybe he does need to be destroyed. And it just so happens that Bruce Banner has bullied his way into Rick's apartment and happens to be in Rick's apartment and turn on the TV and see Rick on the TV saying this, which, sort of too many coincidences put together there for my taste.
Yeah.
But I do really like the panel where Bruce Banner has his head in his hands and you see a big dark shadow behind him as he realizes that Rick Jones has turned against him. Now, do you think that Rick Jones has been hypnotized by the space parasite here or not? Or do you think he's just come to this conclusion?
I think he's genuinely turned against Bruce Banner.
And the reason I ask that is that Betty Ross shows up a few minutes later, and she is defending Bruce, but then she gets hypnotized by some kind of hypno laser that the space parasite shoots at her, and so she turns against Bruce. I was kind of wondering whether maybe I'd missed something and that same thing had happened to Rick.
I guess maybe it hadn't occurred to me, but you're right. He does manage to hypnotize Betty into turning against Bruce as well. Yeah. So
I can say that's not how lasers work. Lasers do not hypnotize you.
That's exactly what you want us to think, Steve.
Yes. It's some kind of different, fancy kind of laser. So the space parasite is trying to get Bruce Banner to turn back into the Hulk so that the space parasite can be parasitic to the Hulk. And so he finally succeeds in doing so, and there's a big fight. Meanwhile, we see that back on the space parasite's original planet, there are people who are still paying attention to him. And it turns out that the space parasite started out as a wise king of these people, and they were being attacked by some other group, and this guy put himself into something called the solar chamber and allowed his body to be bathed by the mysterious rays of Randau's third sun, which reminds me a little bit of the Terrigen Mist story in The Origin of the Inhumans.
Yeah.
But anyway, he comes out of this and he is very powerful, but then now at this point you can see that he is now drooling, or whatever. He's got the crazy mouth at this point, which he didn't have earlier. So then he goes out and he saves his people, but he now has a bloodlust that he cannot satiate. And so he's conquering and sucking up the life force of various things. So his people decide that this guy must die, even though he is far away. They are responsible for him, and so they decide he has to be taken care of, but we do not know where that's going to go yet. Meanwhile, somehow the fight between Hulk and the space parasite ends them up in Yankee Stadium, which is a nice set piece here.
Mm-hmm.
And we see some damage being done to Yankee Stadium. Actually, more than some. There's a fair amount of damage being done to Yankee Stadium here. I hope this is in the off-season. Otherwise, they're going to be in some trouble here.
Miss some games.
Yes, they're going to have to go play some games over on Shea Stadium. So there continues to be a big fight. It involves a subway, I guess, though, in Queens. At that point, it is not a subway anymore. It's just a commuter train. So the space parasite is unable to defeat the Hulk and suck his energy from him. And so he seems to be close to dying. And so at the end, he's like, you know what? I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm going to die. I want to at least go back and be among my people. So then he transports himself back to his ship, but that's right as his people set a self-destruct to go on the ship, and so then he ends up dying out in space. He thinks to himself, nothing left but so tired, weak, death so near. Though I am totally alone, at least soon I shall once again know the meaning of peace. And which is an interestingly touching ending for something that seemed, such an unredeemable character.
Yes.
At the end, law enforcement ends up gassing the Hulk, and he turns back to Banner, and they've got him at gunpoint and say, put him up high, buddy. Don't look now, but it's to be Hulk-in-you'd time again. They're back to that old buzzsaw.
Yes.
So let me look at my notes and see about some things that I may have missed. During the talk show thing, Glenn Talbot at one point is saying, in this scene, taken only a few weeks ago, the Hulk destroys a 50-story building with a single blow. I don't remember that particular incident, but once again, hopefully that was already condemned. They seem to have really good luck with only happening to get into fights around condemned buildings. So there is a reference to Talbot and Ross being in the Air Force in this one here. Again, it seems to go back and forth and back and forth. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Nothing else I need to bother talking about here. What are your thoughts, other than your initial thoughts on the art there?
Yeah, I don't think that Rick is just being mind-zonked here. I think because the space zombie only comes to Earth because he sees this TV show and sees the Hulk clips being used on this TV show. And on the TV show, Rick turns against Bruce Banner or turns against the Hulk. So I think this is genuine, which I think is a good development. I think it's interesting. It's a very dramatic scene to have Rick Jones pull a gun on Bruce Banner and then Betty intervene. It's all very dramatic and interesting. The space parasite is pretty forgettable one-off villain. I hope he's a one-off villain. I doubt he'll ever return. His dripping maw is very distracting and weird. I don't know if they've introduced the Superman villain, the Parasite, yet, who has a very familiar, very similar thing going on. I don't think they have. I think this may predate the Superman villain Parasite, which turned out to be a much more long-lasting character. But I say at the end, okay issue, art looks sloppy, Severed and Giacoya not complimenting each other. Okay villain, nice developments with Rick and Betty. So that's my final feeling on the issue.
Apparently the Parasite did... No, this can't possibly be right. Okay, no, that's the AI overview. No wonder it's wrong. I'm like, wait, didn't appear until 1987? What?
AI overviews, must you always be so terrible? And yes, the answer is you must.
Yes, they must. First appearance, 1966.
Okay.
So he had already... Well, it says first appearance, Jensen... Action Comics 340, 1966. Jones, Firestorm, Volume 2, 1987. Okay, yeah. So the one, right. So I guess that was another, that's what the AI overview was seeing, was this second version of the Parasite. But yeah, 1966. So he did already exist at this point.
Yes. I did a series on my blog where I tried to see if AI could do my job and tried to have AI analyze movies using the questions that I use to analyze movies. And AI just did a hilariously bad job. But that was like 3 years ago. And I've wondered if I should redo the series now and see if AI has gotten any better at it or still makes, these ludicrous mistakes that it made last time. But I don't want to, so I haven't done it. But I've thought about doing it.
One of my tests, early tests of AI when it was first like, oh, okay, maybe this is something everybody's doing, is I asked it to write a very brief bio of you. Mm-hmm. And about 2/3 of the information in there was correct, but what it didn't know, it just made up. So apparently you live in LA, among other things. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So should we go ahead and move on to Iron Man #1?
Yes, let's please do it.
Okay. So Iron Man gets his own series. As we've talked about, every single series that gets its own series, whether it starts off with the new #1 or whether it picks up the numbering of the anthology series it used to be, all were in the middle of storylines. And why they screwed that up so badly and didn't wrap up the old storylines before they broke these people out into their own books, I will never know. The 4 we've done so far, Hulk, Submariner, Captain America, and Iron Man, all broke out in the middle of a storyline. And then they felt like they had to include an origin in the first solo book, but they had to awkwardly shoehorn it in. The most awkwardly shoehorned of all was The Incredible Hulk, where the Warriors 3 learned the Hulk's origin in rhyme from an oracle. But here, this issue, it's big premiere issue. It's got sort of generic Iron Man cover by Colan, but here they don't actually do the origin recap until after the story's over. Just at the end, there's a 3-page backup story with the origin recap, which is probably for the best rather than trying to shoehorn it into a story. So we have this is not only a momentous issue because it is #1 of his own book. It's also the final issue of Gene Colan after many years of Gene Colan doing the art on this book. Next issue, Johnny Craig, who has been inking for the last 3 issues, will take over as penciler. He'll do a good job, but that will only last 3 issues, and then George Tuska takes over as penciler for many years. But first, let's go ahead and do Stan Lee boldly brings forth another blazing bit of bullpen bravado by R.G. Goodwin and Gene Colan, inked by Johnny Craig, lettered by Artie Simek. So let's go ahead and do Colan's last issue here. It says, Alone Against AIM, or what a way to start out in your own mag. Iron Man is stuck in the bottom of this sinking ship, and AIM is trying to grab him. AIM releases gas and gasses him, and he seemingly falls unconscious. And I'm thinking, like, gas works on Iron Man? Like, doesn't he have some sort of filter? Like, wouldn't he be immune to gas? But it seems to work.
I think at this point, those eye and mouth holes were just actually literally holes. I don't think that he yet had... well, and I mean, even for that matter, in the 80s, when they had his spacesuit, they made it clear that he had things that would, close over his eyes. So I think that even up till then, maybe it was still, you can still gas him.
Well, no, you can't gas him, because we find out later in this issue, he's like, no, you can't gas me. I'm Iron Man. I've got filters. I've just been pretending to be unconscious this whole time.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, go on. I forgot.
It says, later he busts out and they go, impossible. He was subjected to enough gas to destroy an ordinary man. And then he says, ordinary men don't wear iron suits with an oxygen supply, and faking unconsciousness is a great way to learn what's new in the world menace business. So Indeed, it is impossible to gas Iron Man, which is what I would think. So then they gas Iron Man. He seemingly passes out. They take him onto their AIM ship. Meanwhile, up on the ship, Cullen and Craig are still just doing a great job with the sheer mass panic going on in the casino, with Sitwell trying to save everybody. However, then Sitwell gets hit by a jet of water and his glasses go off. And he's like, oh no, what can I do without my glasses? Well, then that beautiful woman who was one of Tony's girlfriends who showed up outside of Tony's factory, Whitney Frost, is there like, I'll help you put your glasses back on. And he's like, hey, you're beautiful. And then he then is like, never fear, miss. I was first in my class in airborne jump school. So he jumps into the water to rescue her. Not the best way to rescue her.
And I noticed they make it clear that he's holding on to his glasses as he goes into the water there.
Yes.
Page 5, final panel there, which is a nice little touch.
Yeah, I like that. And so then he then gets rescued by good old Nick Fury, Dum Dum Dugan, and Gabe Jones. It's in every book except for Nick Fury's old book. He's still got the same old partners, Dum Dum Dugan and Gabe Jones. And then they're like, oh, and here's, you just rescued this beautiful woman, Whitney Frost, who we know is also a girlfriend of Tony Stark's. And then she goes ahead and seemingly gives Sitwell what looks like a very passionate kiss. And then Sitwell says, I assure you, Miss Frost, this isn't necessary, but I did my duty, and, well, if you insist. And then Nick Fury says, if I didn't see it, I wouldn't believe it. And then Dum Dum Dugan says, you mean a dame like that, Sean? All right, I'm not going to try my Irish accent. Dum Dum Dugan says, you mean a dame like that showing any interest in Jasp? And then Nick Fury going, no, I mean him showing an interest in her. So,
yes.
So
Nick learns that being a square and being heterosexual are not mutually exclusive.
Exactly, yeah. But then we have this huge twist where she goes home, and you'll recall in the last couple of issues that the Magia was being ordered around by some villain named the Big M, who we assumed was going to be like Count Nefaria in disguise or something like that. Well, it turns out that whole time it was Whitney Frost. That's why Whitney Frost was on that ship, because Whitney Frost, up until the moment that she put the glasses back on Sitwell, was running around commanding the Magia as the Big M. So this is a really fun twist.
That's not how I read that. When she says, I mean, I'm thinking you're probably right. That makes sense. But when she says, with them, we need never suffer such a defeat as we did tonight, and I can again assume my rightful place as the Big M, head of the Magia. So I was seeing that as she wants to take over the Magia, and she considers it her rightful place. But you're saying that she has been the leader this whole time that we've been seeing in shadow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I did not put that together when I read this, but
she's already wearing a big jacket with a huge monogrammed M on it, so I think she's already the Big M.
Well, and the Jodhpurs really gave it away with her being a bad guy.
Yes. She's wearing a red jacket with a huge collar with a monogrammed M on it. She's wearing white Jodhpurs, and she's wearing red what would you call those boots? Red
calf-high boots?
Calf-high boots.
Like knee-high boots, basically.
Knee-high boots. She's quite fetching. But so then AIM goes ahead and brings Iron Man in. You once again have odd choice of splash pages from Colin showcasing his odd Colin tech, his always bizarre Colin technology. And they shove him into a little chamber. They make, I think, a mistake, English language mistake here. Maybe they're not native speakers, but they go, all his power, all of his much vaunted invincibility lies in the secrets of his incredible costume, secrets which will be untapped inside this chamber. I think they mean tapped inside this chamber.
Right.
And they seem to have confused the words tapped and untapped. If they're going to be untapped inside this chamber, then Tony's going to be just fine. But so then we find out that AIM, which has always seemed to be sort of a co-equal organization, now has a leader, a guy named, let's see, what was his name? Mortius. Mortius takes off his beekeeper costume, and it turns out he is an ugly guy. Quite a hideous face that Colin and Craig give him. Looks nice. They try to create a bunch of carbon copies of Iron Man. Iron Man lets them do it, even though he's still just feigning unconsciousness. And then Iron Man finally, as I read before, busts out, reveals that he can't be gassed. And then now he has to face all these carbon copies they've made of him. But he knows they're going to suck, so he doesn't really care. And he's like, yep, your copies suck. They are destroying each other. I don't even need to do anything. And then he gets in a big fight with AIM, and he figures out, as happens so often in the Marvel Universe, that they are going to accidentally blow themselves up. So he's just got to get out of there, and everything's going to be just fine. And he gets out, he flies away, they blow themselves up. It says, Mortius finally got to lead AIM all right, straight into oblivion. It says, next issue, The Demolisher. So, and then at the end, they just have a little 3-issue recap of his origin from his first ever appearance in Tales of Suspense number 39, which they do a very good job of breaking down into just 3 pages. And that's also by Artful Archie, Genial Gene, and inking by Johnny Craig. So, Steve, what did you think of this issue?
Well, it was nice to have Iron Man finally actually face some of the bad guys here. He's been just trying to get out of the sub without actually running into any people for the last, 2 issues, I think. I like the idea that he had some of the components of his armor somehow treated so that they couldn't be copied, and that he knew that this would make the copies malfunction. Mm-hmm. I like the Whitney Frost storyline so far. I have never read these issues before in my life, so I know that she eventually becomes Madame Mask, but beyond that, I'm not sure, and I'm interested to see where that heads.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and yes, and once again, Jasper Sitwell, just Colin has so much fun with Jasper Sitwell.
Yes.
And also just the folks on the ship, you were talking about how well Colin and Craig were doing with the panic on the ship. Page 4, panel 1, that panel that takes up the top half of the page, is just stunning. I love the blonde woman with the pearl necklace, just so much character. It's great.
Yeah, and just as much Johnny Craig there as Gene Colan. There's a lot of Johnny Craig to her.
Yep.
And now Johnny Craig's going to take over the book, at least for a little bit. But
right.
I pointed out, once again, we've got a first issue in which Colan shows someone really, really, really man-spreading on the cover that he likes to draw. He likes to draw people on the covers, especially of their first issues of their books, really spread out. And it's you would think this would be making some sort of permanent damage to Tony Stark to spread his legs out that wide. But I say at the end of my notes, okay issue. Colan has had a pretty good run on the book. Interesting to see Craig take over. Great Big M twist.
Yes. Yeah, and it is interesting. They have Colan stay on for issue 1 and then leave. As opposed to, say, with Submariner, where we get a new artist immediately with his new book. So, preview of coming attractions.
Yes.
So, anything? So shall we go ahead and move on to Marvel Superheroes number 14, featuring Spider-Man?
Let's do it.
All right. So on the cover, an all-new feature-length Spidey thriller, The Amazing Spider-Man in this month's Spotlight, a new artist, an offbeat plot, a different locale, plus many other surprises. And we see what looks like a Frankenstein-looking robot coming at Spider-Man, who is clearly having something going wrong with his head. He's gripping his head, and we see a mad scientist in the foreground with a whole contraption attached to his own head.
Yes, which is not a great cover. They're bragging on the cover, a new artist. And it's like, well, I hope it's not the artist who did this cover, because this cover isn't great. But then we open up the book. Well, first we got some bad news. It's an artist who we've only seen twice before who did bad art on those 2 books that we saw him do before. So it's like, oh no. But then we get shock and surprise. I love the art in this book, which is good because this is a backdoor pilot. This is a chance to show how good Ross Andru can do on Spider-Man. And Ross Andru, it turns out, in about 3 years, is going to take over from Romita, at that point Romita working with Gil Kane, as the regular artist on Spider-Man. And so we get a little preview of that in this issue, and I don't like the cover, but I really like the inside of this book.
Yeah, I've got mixed feelings about it, but I certainly like it way better than I liked either of his previous appearances in the Marvel Universe here. So The Amazing Spider-Man, The Reprehensible Riddle of the Sorcerer, also featuring the spine-chilling Synthetic Man. So they have a little note here. It says, when Jazzy Johnny sprained his wrist, our old pal Ross Andru came to the rescue with this replacement Spidey yarn. But then Johnny made the deadline after all. Since we can't bear to leave this mixed-up little masterpiece slumbering on the shelf, here it is, Pilgrim, a once-in-a-lifetime treat for you. Cunningly concocted by Smilin' Stan Lee and riotous Ross Andru, embellished by Wild Bill Everett, lettered by Swingin' Sammy Rosen, Witchcraft by Forbush Fetishes Incorporated. And the combination of Ross Andru and Bill Everett is interesting. I find that there are some panels in here where it looks almost entirely like Everett.
Yes.
On the splash page, we see a little voodoo doll of Spider-Man with a pin being put in the forehead and little radiating lines coming out of it, and then we see Peter Parker getting a headache.
Yep. So I should say that they had announced that Marvel Superheroes number 14, this book has been hosting Captain Marvel. And so Marvel Superheroes number 12 and 13 had Captain Marvel in them. And at the end of number 13, they announced that number 14 would still have Captain Marvel. Well, then they decided to give Captain Marvel his own book, which starts this month. And so instead, we get this sort of surprise where Spider-Man seemingly takes over Marvel Superheroes here, but it's just for this one issue.
During the 80s, Marvel started having a policy of having, what do they call
it? Inventory stories.
Issues. Yeah, inventory stories ready to go in case somebody missed a deadline or in case just somebody needed to take a break. And this is very much like an inventory story, but they didn't yet have that as a thing. So they just burn it off here instead. But it would have been interesting to go ahead and just, put this in Amazing Spider-Man to give Johnny Romita a break at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So we first see this guy known as the Sorcerer who is in his room. We see a whole bunch of what's, I guess, supposed to come across as mystic, occult sort of stuff, but it involves like a Hindi god and a poster of where the chakras are and a tribal drum of some sort, but then also a demon figurine and maybe a crystal skull. It's an interesting decision on what to put in here. Oh, an Ankh at one point.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, one way or the other, this guy has decided that he is going to he's going to test his mental powers by taking out the most dangerous man alive, who is apparently Spider-Man. He's just been reading way too much of the Daily Bugle. So he's going to test himself by taking him out. Page 3 is a fantastic page. Do you agree with me on this? This is
yes. This is page number 3, where we see Spider-Man swinging around. He's about to interrupt a robbery that he can see through a skylight, and instead he gets zonked by these rays that are radiating out from the Sorcerer's head and then going through the gutters into the rest of Spider-Man's panels. Really beautifully laid out, beautifully penciled by Andru. This is exactly Andru is going to do a very loose-limbed Spider-Man when he takes over. Mm-hmm. And right away here, we get a very loose-limbed Spider-Man, which is going to be Andru's specialty.
Yeah, panels 3 and 5 in particular very much look like what we're going to be seeing from him going forward in the coming years. But yeah, to explain to people what we're seeing, the first panel on the upper left-hand corner, we see a close-up on the Sorcerer's head, and we see a series of concentric circles radiating out from the center of his forehead. And those radiating concentric circles are spreading throughout all of the other panels on the page, each one of which has Spider-Man on it. So it really just brings across the idea that this is stuff coming from his head and interfering with the way that Spider-Man is being. Anyway, that's a really fantastic page, so I just wanted to spend a moment on it.
How is this being done by the same person who did those 2 awful issues of X-Men? It is bizarre. But I should point out that Ross Andru already had a great history as having a great run on Wonder Woman long before he did X-Men. So those 2 X-Men issues must have been done in a big rush, or he didn't care, or the inker was ruining him or something, because I'm really loving the art in this issue, as indeed I liked his long run on Wonder Woman. So I'm back to trusting Andru here.
So Spider-Man decides he needs to go ahead and still break up this robbery, even though he is now being zonked by the Sorcerer. Unknown to him what's going on. All he knows is that he's suddenly being zonked. So he breaks in through the skylight. He seems to be having a real problem actually fighting the guys, but he finally gets the upper hand. I was saying that some places in here look way more like Everett than like Ross Andru. Page 5, panel 1.
Yeah.
Look at the face of that gangster there. I mean,
yeah.
That's Everett all the way on that one. But Spider-Man gets the upper hand. He's able to break up the robbery, but he is not feeling well. We get a bit of a backstory of the Sorcerer. He apparently has natural ESP powers. He was trying to research more about it. He goes and finds mystics in India and in Africa, and there may be a third location there where he is getting more skills. But then he goes and builds himself a machine, a psycho intensifier, to boost his power. So he's got his little Spider-Man voodoo doll thing here. And then, do you understand what the whole idea was for him to take the voodoo doll, put it in a box, and mail it to Spider-Man, care of General Delivery, New York, New York? What is the thought here? What is the plan?
I have no idea. I have no idea how he thinks this will help him in any way. I guess he just wants to taunt Spider-Man by going like, by the way, you don't know why you were feeling so zonked. Well, it was because I put a little pin in the head of your doll and now I'm going to have it delivered to you, assuming the police can somehow track you down, which famously they cannot do. But he says he's going to mail it. And he says, although nobody knows Spider-Man's address, the police will sooner or later open this package, and then the world will know who was it that defeated him. So I guess he doesn't want he addresses it to Spider-Man. Why doesn't he just address it to the police? Like, hello, Mr. Police. Here is which I think is from a real famous serial killer letter. And then if he wants the police to get it, why doesn't he send it to the police or drop it off at the police or something? It's pretty easy to reach the police. Why is he addressing it to Spider-Man, General Delivery? And you would think that what would happen is exactly what happens, that the post office is like, this is not an adequate address, return it to sender, which is exactly what they do. And then that kills him. Spoiler alert. That's how the issue ends, is the post office trying to return his dumb doll to him from a poorly addressed box. Somehow, the sound of the doorbell ringing kills the sorcerer at the end of the book without Spider-Man ever knowing the sorcerer ever exists.
Also note that the sorcerer put his actual return address on there.
Yes.
There's no need to do that. Yeah, there are many things about this issue that make no sense. Anyway, so while this pin is still in the forehead of the Spider-Man doll in the box, Pete is not doing well. And so he has to break a double date. And so Harry Osborn gets to go out with both Betty and Veronica. I'm sorry, I mean Gwen and MJ.
Yes, Ross Andrew does a good job doing all of Pete's supporting cast as well as doing Pete, so he's really getting to get a good tryout for the book. Except for, interestingly, he's got Gwen without her headband, and she looks very Ditko. So you've got MJ looking very Ramita, and you've got Gwen looking very Ditko. So it's almost like Peter is trying to have to choose between his two artists, trying to have to choose between Ramita and Ditko here.
I was thinking that Gwen looks kind of like Grace Kelly here.
Yeah.
Is that just my imagination, or I don't know.
Yeah, anyway, there's a bit of that.
So then the sorcerer uses his psycho intensifier to make Spider-Man, here as Peter Parker, get up and go get a cab. Of course, Harry sees him. He's like, you just said you were too sick to go out, and then now I see you coming and getting in a cab. What the hell's going on? And but doesn't get an answer. So then Pete goes and buys a plane ticket to New Orleans because of this control. I'm surprised that he had enough money to buy a plane ticket to New Orleans, but yes. He then gets there and just rents the first hotel that he finds, and it's apparently during Mardi Gras. So I'm guessing that Mardi Gras wasn't quite the national or international tourist mayhem that it is these days. If you could just go and get a hotel when you first arrive. So he sees that there's Mardi Gras, and he gets in his Spider-Man costume, and he's like, oh, I'll go down and enjoy Mardi Gras for a minute here because people will just think I'm in costume. Somehow then he finds the synthetic man, which at one point is referred to as the Hollow Man.
Huh. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, where is that here? So on page 12, final panel, the sorcerer is thinking, for it is there that he will meet the Hollow Man. Although in every other case, he's referred to as the Synthetic Man, which is a little bit odd. Anyway, one way or the other, Spider-Man gets into a fight with the Synthetic Man, which is being controlled by the Sorcerer. Generally, I like Spider-Man in this fight. The Synthetic Man comes across as kind of stiff and Frankenstein-y in a way that I'm not necessarily a big fan of. So the fight ends up spilling out into the street during Mardi Gras, and folks are just like, oh, this is part of an act, right? I hope so. I certainly hope he's pretending. Say, look at the guy. He must have hurt himself in the fall. So then, yeah, at this point, as you pointed out, the mail ends up returning this package to sender and ringing the doorbell, and somehow the doorbell is able to short circuit the psycho intensifier and kill the sorcerer, at which point the synthetic man loses its control, drops what it was about to throw onto Spider-Man, and then goes and walks out into the Gulf of Mexico. And yeah, Spider-Man at this point, and the pain goes away, even though the pin is still in the doll, right?
Yes.
But I guess if the sorcerer, maybe it has to do through the power of the sorcerer that the voodoo doll was able to do what it was doing. So then at this point, Spider-Man just has to figure out how to get home from New Orleans and figure out what he's going to do with that big hole that he just blew in his budget.
So Andrew shows that he can be a very good penciler. If Andrew is doing the plotting on this issue, he does not show himself to be a great plotter. The plotting in this issue is pretty bizarre and random. I never like issues in which the hero never finds out the villain exists and the villain manages to affect the hero from afar, and the hero never finds this out, and then the villain gets somehow hoisted on his own petard and gets defeated without them ever actually meeting. It makes no sense to relocate Spider-Man to New Orleans in this issue. Like, the sorcerer is in New York, as we know from him writing his return address on the package. Why doesn't the whole story just stay in New York? But the reason to go to New Orleans is Mardi Gras is a lot of fun. And it is very fun to have this whole story taking place during Mardi Gras. I think it would make more sense if the sorcerer himself was in New Orleans, if Spider-Man had defeated the synthetic man and then found the sorcerer and then arrested the sorcerer instead of him being killed by his doorbell getting rung. That would have been a much more satisfying ending.
Just the whole thing about, oh yeah, ring the doorbell and then that destroys my machine. It's like, what? Yeah, but yes, it is nice to get a preview of coming attractions when it comes to Ross Andru being a Spider-Man penciler.
Yep. And Ross Andru will co-create the Punisher and do all sorts of wonderful work when he takes over Spider-Man. But we just get a little preview of that here. And then Andru, I think, goes back to DC and goes back to doing Wonder Woman for a couple years before he finally comes back to do Spider-Man.
Oh, there's one weird thing. So when MJ is getting the call that their double date is going to be broken, so on page 9, panel 3, caption says, thus, minutes after the call to Dr. Bromwell, Mary Jane Watson's phone is picked up by the raven-tressed charmer herself.
Huh. Okay. I mean, she's got a lot more ink in her hair than I think she usually has. So it looks like she's got, sort of blackish red hair here, but I still wouldn't call her raven tressed. There's still a lot of red in her hair. Ravens aren't red.
Yeah, and this is supposedly scripted by Stan Lee, so I don't know what got crossed in his mind, but that really jumped out at me. Anyway, that was the last little odd thing to point out. Overall, good coming attraction.
Yeah, as I say in my notes, bizarre story, but good action and good backdoor pilot for Andru taking over the book in a few years. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our final book of the middle of this month. Our final book of this episode, Prince Namor the Submariner, #1, big premiere issue. So, generally speaking, with the 3 books so far that we have read bump out into their own book, none of them has attempted to upgrade the penciler. So far, I guess we've seen Hulk, Captain America, and Iron Man bump out into their own books. And all 3 of them kept the same penciler. And I think same inker when they bumped down to their own book. Well, here we get a book where they're like, if we're going to give this guy his own book, maybe we should give him a big upgrade. So we have Prince Namor the Submariner, big premiere issue, and right away, this cover is gorgeous. And this cover is very clearly by John Buscema. And it's like, that's an awesome John Buscema cover. Dare we hope that he does the inside? Because when he does covers, he doesn't always do the inside. So then we open our issue as if pretending I have the actual issue in my hands instead of a digital file. And it says, Prince Namor, the Submariner, Years of Glory, Day of Doom, Stan Lee rhapsodically reigns over a Roy Thomas John Buscema paean to grandeur past. Legendary inking by Frank Giacoia, legible lettering by Sam Rosen. So we've got Buscema inked by Giacoia, which is the best art team this book has ever had. And
well, it's also the best inker that they've put on John Buscema in his brief period here so far.
yes,
Well, I don't know who actually inked him in the Hulk when he had an issue there.
don't remember.
That may have been decent, but recently here they've been putting inkers on him, including himself, who are not necessarily the best on him. But yeah, Frank Giacoia does a fantastic job. Although I do have to say, the splash page here on the first page, something about the bad guy, what's his name? Anyway,
Destiny.
something about Destiny's proportions is all off, in my own personal opinion.
Yeah, I guess it looks fine to me. So then we jump into the issue. Unfortunately, as with the other 3 issues bumping out into number 1s, we are in the middle of a storyline. And once again, are going to have an issue where they feel the need to shoehorn in the origin. But they're going to do a much better job of it here than they have done before. So Destiny has seemingly killed the Submariner. He has crushed him in an ice avalanche here. And an ice slide, you might call it. And he is saying, oh, good, Submariner's dead. This allows me to reminisce about the past. And so then we get just gorgeous John Buscema art as Destiny remembers that, well, he remembers, just a second, what exactly is happening here? He remembers the origin of, I guess that's right, he was in the middle, in the last issue.
So I think he was on the icebreaker ship that had Namor's father on it when they were accidentally doing destruction to the original Antarctic Atlantis.
No, never mind. All right, let me start over again with this.
Okay.
So
sure.
then Destiny is ranting, and then we cut to... See, this is... No, so this is, you can see from the eyebrows on the bottom of page 2 that this is Submariner remembering these things. He spoke... So I guess Destiny is ranting about knowing Submariner's father, and then Submariner, who is not dead, who is trapped under the ice, is remembering things, and he remembers hearing about his own origin from before he was born. And it's hard to tell if we're going back in Destiny or Submariner's point of view here, but
yes, it is.
Because it's something that neither of them would have actually been there for. But we begin with, we finally get to see the damage. We cut back to the story that we originally heard way back in, I guess this would have been Marvel Comics #1. What comic introduced Submariner back in the day? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was Marvel Comics #1. I think that's correct.
And so then we get the biggest flashback we've gotten to that so far, the biggest recap of his origin, where we show that there is an icebreaker that is going through the Antarctic ice, and is breaking it up, and then we see all the damage this is doing to Atlantis down below, and then Thakor, the emperor of Atlantis, is like, I'm going to send my daughter, Princess Fen, to go investigate up on the surface, and she then lands on the surface. We get to see her actual language a little bit here, Vo Turak, Vo Zala, Kam Alto, but very quickly she figures out how to communicate with them, or at least communicate well enough to let them know, I want a bone. So then she goes ahead and decides to hook up with Mackenzie, the captain of the ship here. And just to make it clear that Submariner is not a bastard, we get to see that they have a little priest there on the ship who marries them very quickly. 3 days later, it says. Well, it doesn't say 3 days. It doesn't say 3 days. It says, but if strange are the ways of the sea, stranger still are the ways of love. And so not many days afterwards, and he marries them. And then finally, down below, they send soldiers up. They realize Princess Fen is not doing her job and is not coming back. So they send soldiers up, kill everybody on board, then bring Princess Fen back, sort of clapped in chains. May Neptune be revered. My daughter is returned to me, and my heart soars. And she says, but not so the heart of Fen, my father. For though the surface men in ignorance did menace us, one among them did I love. So then we cut to Submariner has grown up and is playing football with a bunch of Atlantean warriors, but they're all dressed up in full armor, and he's just dressed up in briefs, and it's a little strange. Then we quickly review him getting involved in World War II and fighting Nazis, gorgeously drawn by Buscema, of him entering a submarine, then destroying Japanese ships in the Pacific, thankfully without any caricatured Japanese faces.
It's Japanese planes, yeah.
Yes, destroying Japanese planes in the Pacific, and then remembers, we sort of find out for the first time how he eventually ended up with amnesia. First, he gets free and fights with Destiny some more. So they fight for a while. Wait, or is this a
this
flashback of fighting with Destiny?
This is still the flashback.
Oh, this is still the flashback. Okay, in the flashback,
yeah. This is pretty confusing. I like how they integrate the origin into the story better, but they could have done a better job of separating out the flashbacks from current day.
Okay, I'm sorry, folks. I am not doing a good job of summarizing this issue. So then Atlantis sort of gets destroyed again, and then he realizes that it's Destiny doing it. So this is presumably sometime around the end of World War II. We see him get in a fight with Destiny then. Unfortunately, he and Destiny are wearing the same clothes they're wearing in the modern day storyline. And they're once again fighting in sort of an Arctic place. And it's completely impossible to distinguish this from the modern day fight that's going on between the two of them. And so then Destiny then uses his mental powers to give Submariner amnesia. And Submariner is basically a bum now. So where do bums end up? They end up in the Bowery. And so then he, after a series of misadventures, ends up growing a big beard and mustache and living in the Bowery. Well, then we get a recap of the events of Fantastic Four #4, in which Johnny is also sort of living as a bum in the Bowery because he's run away from the Fantastic Four, and he runs into Submariner, uses a flaming finger to burn off his beard and mustache, which I would think would require a lot of trust on the Submariner's part, or supreme apathy, I guess, if he's not worried about it. So then they review one of the weirdest moments in all Marvel Comics, where Human Torch then took Submariner, dumped him in the ocean, and then waited there on the docks to see if Submariner came back or if he drowned, in which case, as you've pointed out before on this podcast, Steve, it's sort of like the witch test from medieval England. Well, if he drowns, then he wasn't the Submariner, but if he floats, then he was. Then I'm going to have to fight him. But if he drowns, then I'll be all set. But so then they reveal then, in that original issue, it's like Submariner swam away, found Atlantis destroyed, swam back, and Johnny was still on the dock. It's like, well, how far away is Atlantis? Well, here they make it clear that was after swimming to a nearby outpost of Atlantis. I discovered it deserted. My people vanished, thus returning to the surface. So then he reviews the events of Fantastic Four #4 somewhere, where he attacks the surface world with Giganto, a giant walking whale type guy.
Who I have compared with Blowhole from the old Tick cartoon.
Yes.
Yes, he very much comes across like Blowhole.
So then we cut back to, after all this flashback to his origin, we see Submariner finally escape from being trapped under the ice and decide he's going to have it out with Destiny. But next ish, somewhere along the way, Triton. This issue is obviously a tremendous mess in terms of making me very confused, but the art is so gorgeous that I just don't care. The art is just absolutely gorgeous. By far the best art we've ever seen on this book, of Buscema, inked by Giacoya, who is just doing a beautiful job inking him. What did you think of this issue, Steve?
I think I more or less said earlier that I like them doing a better job of integrating the origin in here, but I really wish they had done a better job with giving some sort of visual clues as to what is current day and what is flashback.
Yeah.
Giving some sort of... I mean, obviously, the Submariner has never had any other... well, you know what? He has had red trunks from time to time and green trunks from time to time. Maybe they could have given him red trunks in some of them and green trunks in the other one. Or they could have had Destiny wearing a cape in the earlier episodes and not in this. I don't know. They could have done something to make this come across more clear.
Oh, yeah. It was a huge mistake.
Yeah, but the art, though, is fantastic, and I'm excited, actually, that they are going to have him pitted against Triton in the next issue. That seems like a natural meeting that I'm glad that they are giving us, because, as you pointed out, it's always difficult to have stories about Triton because he really needs to be in the water, and how many people are you going to be able to have him fight in the water? Oh, wait!
Yes.
Do we have good news? Yeah, do you know how long John Buscema stays on this book?
I think he stays on for a little while. I did peek ahead a little bit to make sure he stayed on for a while, and he does.
Nice. I am looking forward to that.
Yes.
Oh, the one other thing I'll point out is, and this may have been from the original Fantastic Four #4 issue, but Reed has an aside about when thing uses a low-yield nuclear bomb to kill Giganto. Reed, after it goes off, says, "It's lucky that was one of the so-called, quote, clean bombs." And I'm like, wait, are there clean nuclear bombs?
I know there are dirty nuclear bombs, so the existence of dirty bombs implies the existence of clean bombs.
I think a clean bomb is a bomb that does not have nuclear material in it. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, one way or the other, it's nice to imagine that there's such a thing as a clean bomb.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah, so I'm looking forward to more.
Yes, I think it's great. And just a little bit of, he does say, unless you call the invisible girl becomes my bride. So just a little flashback to the fact that he used to be super into Sue, which has never really been a topic of this book. But here we get one of the few acknowledgments of it. But yeah, I say in my notes, great issue, beautiful art, a good reason for flashback, my favorite Submariner issue yet. I said that until I realized I had to sum it up and I had no idea what was actually happening. But other than that, it's a great issue. Anyway, yes, so these were 5 issues. We've recorded longer than we have been recording recently. This may be a longer episode. We are covering 5 books, and as opposed to the 4 we're covering last episode and next episode. Well, I should say that not only do they have to give everybody their own book now, but they also have to give everybody the name of their own letters column. So the new letter column here, they have had to create the name Send It to Subby. So
yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not good.
But anyway, so this has been 4 interesting books. We had 2 big number ones, Submariner number 1 and Iron Man number 1, which was fascinating to see how they handled that. And it was a great issue of Fantastic Four. It was an okay issue of Hulk and promising issue of Spider-Man, promising one-off Spider-Man story.
Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and wrap up here, and we will finish up May of 1968 a week from now, and I'm looking forward to talking about some of those books.
Yep. Well, I'm looking forward to finishing up this massive month.
Yes. And then we'll figure out what we're doing for next month. I don't think we have quite this many issues next month, right?
I don't remember, but I mean, Strange Tales is about to break off into separate S.H.I.E.L.D. and Doctor Strange books, so I forget how many issues we have that month, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll figure that out. We're playing it by ear. So, okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We always appreciate it. We always would appreciate any reviews or ratings that you might be able to do on your podcatcher. Those always help us. I'd also like to thank the folks who have signed up for our Patreon. We, just a few. We aren't actually giving much value for it or any value for it at the moment, other than just your satisfaction to know that you're helping support the show. That might change at some point in the future, but thank you very much for that.
Yes, we may stop giving you that satisfaction in the future. You never know. But no, we might give you even more satisfaction in the future. Let's put it that way. But we'll figure it out.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care and stay safe out there.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, we now have a Patreon where you can show your appreciation. If you've got a few bucks, head over to patreon.marvelrereadclub.com to support us. Also, you can still rate and review us at your podcatcher of choice, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. You can find us online at marvelrereadclub.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. See you next time.